So today I just like to do a very quick review of this scope. It's a Nikon Monarch 4x16 by 42, and it's a scope that I got to replace 3x9 Buckmasters that I had. Just wanted a little bit more range, and also I really like to be able to correct the focus. The Parallax Adjustment is very valuable, especially when I'm testing loads, and you just want to be sure that you're aiming at a target and not waving around with your eyeball. Sometimes without the Parallax Adjustment you can be pretty close, but a little bit of change in position of your eye in relation to the reticle is gonna change the point of impact. So overall, the scope is like most Nikon products, it's got excellent optics, very well built. I like the fact that it comes with the little flip up covers. That's a nice touch. I wish all scopes did. The Butler Creek ones are great, but I mean, it's such a small thing that they should include it for the price. The scope is on my Remington 700 CDL, and it's a 270 rifle. That's why I wanted to have a 4x16. If if I'm out there hunting mule deer, out to maybe 300-400 yards, and if you see something across the valley, it's good to have a little bit of extra magnification to identify the animals, the antlers and whatnot. So as far as the choice between first focal plane versus the second focal plane in a hunting rifle, I don't think it's a big deal, and they're not far in price. But if you look at the ballistic chart for 270 out to 400 yards, the compensation, the drop compensation, is so small that it really doesn't make sense to adjust anything. It's a round that should be shot with rifle sighted in at point blank range, probably sighted in around 250, 275, and you really don't have to worry about, you're not plinking targets. This is we're talking about targets about 10 inches in diameter out to 400 yards. You're capable of doing that without any adjustments whatsoever. So this is actually just found a nice shot. This is what the reticle looks like, and you can see there's 4 circles of the bullet drop compensation. And like I said, if you sight in at maximum magnification, crosshairs being 100, then your next circle would be 200, 3, 4, 5, and the post would be 6. Now that's just a rough idea. You do have to check it against your bullet weight and velocity. Consult Nikon spot on software, but this is this is actually pretty cool. This is a very clear shot of the reticle. So that's what it looks like. So here we're at Nikon spot on online software, and I just want to show you something visually, and you can then make a decision for yourself whether it's worth it to go with a first focal plane scope or stay with the second focal plane scope for hunting. Personally, I find that the second focal plane scope, especially in calibers 270 and up, meaning 270, 30-06, any Magnum cartridges, I think it's going to be largely irrelevant for hunting purposes, and I'll show you why. So let's take a look at this Monarch 3, and here we go. Monarch 3 4x16 by 42 BDC. That's the scope that we have here. And we'll go and select 270. Here we go. And let's see. The bullet that I was shooting just now was 150 Nosler. That's the one. And so if you know the software, you know you can customize all kinds of things, but here we'll just go with the basics. And so before we get too far, for the sake of the argument supporting choice of a second focal plane scope for hunting, or you know, if you've got the money that you know, burns the hole in your pocket, go ahead and buy first focal plane. That's perfectly fine. But if you're on a budget and you want the best scope for the money, then my point is that you're not missing very much. And again, let me stress it one more time, for hunting, not for target shooting, for hunting. So 270, it's a fairly long range hunting cartridge, and I'm not talking about miles here. I'm talking about, you know, 400 yards is a long shot, and most hunters would agree that 400 yards is a long range hunting. All the other stuff that you see guys shooting 1,000 yards and 1,500 yards, that's something else. We're not talking about that. So 270 historically provided a point blank range with 0 at around 250 to 275 yards. So let's take a look at that. Let's go 275 to the target and 275 0. And we fire. So all the BDC scopes are usually designed to work at maximum magnification. Then they give you what's expected at 100 yard 0. So what I mean by that is 0 at 100 yards at your crosshairs. Next drop would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here we've actually zeroed the rifle with a point blank range to illustrate this particular situation. So 270 zeroed at 275 gives you roughly 3 inches, something like that, high at 100 yards, and everything else basically going to hit a 10-inch target out to 350 roughly, so maybe even to 400 with a 130 grain bullet. But here we're looking at our next drop is 344. So look how little you have to work with. If the animal is this big, it's irrelevant. It becomes even more irrelevant if you zoom out. I doubt that anybody's hunting with scope set at maximum magnification. With this particular scope, I find that I'm very comfortable using it at about 7 power. So at 7 power, you have the next drop is at 427 yards. There's absolutely nothing that needs to be done. You point and shoot at basically whatever magnification you have. So at 10, it's nearly 400 yards, 384, and then 500 yards. So yeah, I find it's the drop compensation is useful. Knowing your point blank
zero, you know that you don't need to adjust anything. You can point and shoot out to 300 yards, and then if in fact you see an elk at 400 yards, and yeah, go ahead, you can put them in that circle, and that's perfectly fine. But you don't really need any more sophistication in this scope for hunting purposes. Another thing that most hunters would agree with me on is usually when you see an animal, whether it's a deer, well, maybe with elk you have a little bit more time, or a moose, but if you see a deer, you don't have a lot of time to figure things out and dial. You'll be lucky if you have time to range it. That's why point blank is, I find, a superior way of zeroing your rifle. A lot of times you have a split second. Here it is, here it's not. So with this kind of setup, you have a good chance. It's a bright scope, very good range of magnification. If you have a chance of sitting somewhere on a hill looking across the valley with your binoculars hunting mule deer, and you see something, you can zoom right in, hone in on that animal and that target, use the full magnification. Chances are either it's too far to shoot and you got to make some legwork, or if it's within the range, it's well within the point blank range. So that's about it. Another thing I'd like to show you is this ballistic calculator on gun data. Most of you guys probably know it, but I just wanted to show you this quick illustration again. So here it is. Here's the curve, the trajectory of a 270 150 grain bullet, and here you can see roughly 3 inches at 100 yards. Then it rises a little bit more at 150. Then you back on target at 270 and down 5 inches at 340, and 7-8 inches at 360. If you're aiming at 8 to 10 inch chest of a typical whitetail and mule deer, you're very comfortable in the range of 350 yards. No adjustments needed whatsoever. You know roughly that if the deer is close, or appears to be closer, you put your crosshairs a little bit lower. If it's further away and you're doubting the range or haven't had a chance to really range it, well, center or slightly high. That's just as simple as that. And you don't have to take my word for it. Try it, or pay attention next time you're hunting how much time you have to make any adjustments. Virtually none. And so this is just I find this is a very easy visual explanation of the differences between point blank zero and having second focal plane scope. Does not hinder you in any way.